you literally cannot get any closer to landing.
I was panicking there for several hours, and still am a little bit.
It turns out that the laws of physics apply equally in the United States of America as they do in the People's Republic of China.
Good morning. How's everything up in the sky?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tomorrow. It has been another crazy week in spaceflight, and there is a lot of stuff that we need to talk about. Been quite a bit of political drama and back and forth between the leaders of the free world and the leader of human spaceflight right now. And there's also quite a bit of discussion going on in the Senate about the budget for NASA. Unfortunately, we've had another failure at the moon, and there is so much more to talk about. So let's just get right into it. Joining me today, we have Ryan Caton, who I am very much looking forward to your thoughts and opinions on this. I've got Jared Head here. We also have Dutta here, and we've got to talk about the drama. So for anyone who missed it, there was a bit of a fallout between Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and started publicly talking about each other's contracts and programs. And basically, Trump was saying that the easiest way to start saving billions of dollars with the budget is to cancel all of the subsidies and contracts for all of Elon Musk's companies. And what concerns us the most is what's the contracts for SpaceX. And in response to that, Elon said that he would begin decommissioning the Dragon spacecraft immediately. And then not too long later, a couple hours later, walked back on that a bit and said, okay, we won't decommission Dragon. But still, just the thought of it has been a very scary proposition, and it has brought up quite a few different alternative scenarios to what might happen if, such a thing were to actually occur. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm still on the fence as to whether or not this is just a big, massive troll, or if there's a serious risk that a lot of the contracts for SpaceX might get canceled. So let's discuss. You know what? Since I called you out first, Ryan, I would like to hear your thoughts about all this. I mean, I was panicking there for several hours, and still am a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, at least for the moment, it seems that calmer minds have prevailed, because Elon has since, he replied to a reply. So one person on X has single-handedly saved US spaceflight for the foreseeable future. Thank you to that person. No, but seriously, he removed the post saying that SpaceX would begin decommissioning Dragon immediately. The interesting point I found with this whole deal is Dragon isn't the only contract that Tesla, SpaceX, and all of other of Elon Musk's companies have with the US government, right? Dragon is what, if we just think about SpaceX, Dragon is one of many contracts that SpaceX has with NASA. We have science missions which are launched on Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. We have defense payloads which are launched on Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. But the first thing that came to Elon's mind was Dragon, which I think is really interesting because it kind of adds to the rumors we've been hearing for a while now that Elon doesn't really want to keep developing Dragon. He wants to move on to Starship, a human-rated Starship, as quickly as possible. And it doesn't seem like he really holds that much regard for Dragon, at least from his comments, because, as soon as President Trump threatened to cancel his contract, the first thing that came to mind in his sort of quick emotional response on X was, well, we'll begin decommissioning Dragon immediately. Not the defense contracts, not the science contracts. It was Dragon. So I think I am very much, I'm kind of 99% sure Dragon will stick around. I very much doubt this will actually happen. I have a feeling maybe this was a moment similar to back in the early days of Falcon Heavy, where Elon was like, cancel everything, and then Gwen Shotwell ran into the room at the 11th hour and was like, no, we can't cancel Falcon Heavy, we can't cancel Falcon Heavy. So I think this might have been a similar scenario, maybe, just a little bit more emotional. So yeah, I think this was definitely an emotional post going significantly over the top. But yeah, I do think the underlying idea that Dragon was the first thing that came to Elon's mind when he thought, what should we cancel? I find that very interesting.
Yeah. It's certainly not the largest contracts that SpaceX currently has with the federal government. However, maybe it's the most visible. That's your kind of average person might still be like, "Oh, what? You're gonna," and actually, right? I loved your joke in our Discord that you were talking about of how now it's flipped from what the headlines were a year ago, and SpaceX has stranded astronauts at the International Space Station. If this were to play out that way. But yeah, I don't know. It just it's a crazy thought, and a lot of really good points are being brought up about how this isn't the only customer for the Dragon spacecraft. I mean, in just a couple of days, we have another private Axiom mission that's launching on Tuesday, and that is the fifth and final Dragon spacecraft that Peggy Whitson, as the tradition has been, the commander of the first mission for it, gets to choose what its name is. So I'm really eager to hear what name she gets to pick for it. And I'm sure that Axiom is going to want to do many more missions with the Dragon spacecraft in the future. There's the whole idea of whether or not Jared Isaacman is going to continue with the Polaris program. I think we're all hoping that he does. And if so, then there's more Dragon missions just from that right there, at least one more. And, a lot of the other private spaceflight companies have included Dragon in their architecture for private space stations. Vast, even Starlab, is looking at that, and so there's a lot of other business, even if they were to cancel everything with the International Space Station with the U.S. government. So it would be really, really
I mean, it goes without saying,
unwise.
cancelling Dragon would, end human spaceflight in the Western world. It just would, because without Dragon, we have Starliner, which is in limbo. NASA says it is going to fly again. Boeing hasn't said anything about Starliner since it returned to since the crew flight test returned to Earth uncrewed back in the September timeframe of last year. So that would then just leave Soyuz. And are we going to go back to the decade-long period we had of paying Russia to fly American and European astronauts to the International Space Station? And then what happens when the International Space Station is retired? Russia has dropped the cadence of Soyuz flights from every 6 months to every 9 months because they need to save money, because they cannot fund their human spaceflight program at the same degree they were a few years ago because of all of the sanctions and the war in Ukraine and so forth. So
I
it would
think
be really devastating. It would be the end of human spaceflight in the Western
I
world.
agree.
I think you're overestimating the importance of science exploration and research to this current administration. I don't think they would pay for Russian seats.
Yeah, I doubt they would at this stage anyway, either. And if they did, they would go about it in such a weird roundabout way that it wouldn't hit major headlines.
Well, and like, despite our long cooperation with Russia on International Space Station, I think giving Roscosmos and anything related or touching Putin is kind of a poison pill at this moment in politics.
Yeah. Jared, what are your thoughts about all of this? As nicely as you can.
I mean, where do I even begin with this? Should we turn the rant light on at this point? Well, turns out even if you pay $250 million to purchase a country, you don't really get a say in how to run it, huh? So. I can also say, what were you expecting? Were you expecting this executive branch to just kind of let you run around with however you want to do your things? Like, did past experience not show you what the present would net you? And it's very difficult for me to seriously take hold on, I'm trying to figure out a correct way to phrase this. It's very
okay,
hard
it's
for
kind of
me.
hard.
Yeah, I kind of don't really want to tiptoe around it anymore, because I feel like I have a very much feeling a level of regret and culpability in platforming the people, and no politicsing our way into these kinds of things occurring now. Um, so yeah, there's that. But to kind of just stay on topic, at least for here, we could save the other fun, really spicy stuff for after dark if we want to. Um, I don't, I don't know if any of us were very particularly surprised at the implosion of a bromance of someone who holds themselves higher than the number of dollars that they apparently have, along with somebody who just cannot claw themselves out of the K-hole for however hard they try. So um, it's just a mess. And what how's the saying go? I like to clown, enjoy the circus, or something like that. So I just
Something like that.
you're taking a gander at what happens when you put two wildly incompatible people together who don't who don't give each other an inch in terms of what they're going to do. So yeah, I don't really know what to say other than um, having a single supplier is not a good idea. We've never exactly said that it's a good idea here on the show. Redundancy has always been the way to go. And if you lose your company that's providing your transportation services simply because someone has an emotional spat over the fact that a friendship may end, um, holy smokes, what a bad foundation you had for your human spaceflight program. So, yeehaw! Like, I mean, like what were we who could have expected this? I guess is kind of what we're sitting back and saying to ourselves at this point, for many of us. So we'll have to figure this out. So
I mean,
and yeah, it's such a weird situation, right? Because usually it would be like an engineering issue that would be causing the causing to threaten to collapse a program or something like that. It's usually not a personal issue between two specific individuals in the case of Elon Musk and President Donald Trump here. So like I can't really think of when a personal issue between two people coming to loggerheads has caused something like this in spaceflight before. But if somebody in the chat room can think of that, or somebody in the comments can think of it watching this on demand, I'm certainly all eyes and ears to have heard about that. It's just such a weird, uncomfortable situation, and I just don't like it. And it's
yeah.
just I'm thinking about it. I want to have to go take a cold shower and scrub myself with concrete to try to remove the feelings of it. It just feels nasty, like I feel genuinely uncomfortable having to talk about it, but here we are, right? So
The closest thing I can even think of, and certainly nowhere near as public, would be like Richard Shelby bullying everybody and kind of always getting his way when it came to NASA contracts and making sure that Huntsville, Alabama, was always getting a large share of something. And over the past decade, that's been SLS, which, at the same time that all this drama was going on between Elon and Trump, Senator Cruz, the chairman of the Senate Armed Forces Committee, put out a counter proposal to the current NASA budget, and also trying not to be negative about that. He is asking for almost $10 billion to support the Moon and Mars program, the Artemis program. But the direction that he's proposing to go with it, I'm not too happy about. Let me just pull up some of this so that you can see what I am talking about. Um, Interestingly, at the same time that all this was going on, all of this drama between Elon and Trump, Senator Cruz Forces Committee, and the committee that does a lot of the proposal work before it's fully voted on by Congress, had a counter proposal to the president's proposal for what NASA's budget should be, and wants to commit almost $10 billion in support of the Artemis program and the Moon and Mars program. Unfortunately, some of it seems to be a little bit misdirected. So, just a quick summary: he wants $700 million for a Mars telecommunications orbiter, which would support a Mars sample return mission, which all depends on whether or not that gets canceled, but could also support future manned missions. So, essentially, a Martian, hopefully high-power communication satellite. Then they also are asking for $2.6 billion to fully fund the Lunar Gateway. That is something that has been talked about being canceled, and there was only a little bit of money in the president's budget proposal to basically end the contracts and finish paying off the contractors who are currently building pieces of it right now, one of which has already been delivered to Cape Canaveral and is being outfitted for a launch. They also want $4.1 billion to continue the space launch system, importantly for Artemis 4 and Artemis 5. And the problem with that is both of those missions would require the exploration upper stage, the more powerful upper stage that they've been working on for a couple of years, that is already way over budget and way beyond its initial schedule, much like the entire Space Launch System program. And there's a little bit of money for the Orion space capsule to ensure that they have their fourth Orion finished that is currently being developed, and then set aside stuff to do any sort of refurbishment for the 4 Orion capsules that they have. And then $1.25 billion in support of the International Space Station to make sure that all of its operations are going to be covered for the next 5 years. And kind of importantly, to make sure that they will have a smooth transition over to private commercial space stations for the LEO destination program, and that there wouldn't be any gap in that low Earth orbit experiments that we do on a regular basis. And to make the rest of the senators happy who are part of this committee, there's a little bit of money, $1 billion worth, spread across several different facilities to give them infrastructure upgrades, repairs, and so forth. And like I said, this is probably to appease other senators. But then, interestingly,
I was going to say,
ahead.
for the infrastructure upgrades there, that's actually something that NASA has as a whole. NASA has spoken to deferred maintenance on their facilities at all of their centers. And the current total of that deferred maintenance is somewhere on the order of about $5 billion. So that $1 billion would be very helpful towards the deferred maintenance and other things that needs to be done that hasn't been done because there just hasn't been money for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get that. But at the same time, I can't help but think of that kind of political nature of all the senators involved when making sure that their district gets their cut. So
yeah,
I see
I
that
want my
both
piece of the
ways.
pie.
Yeah, I see that both ways. Everyone getting their piece of the pie and necessary upgrades. Sorry,
why
Beto,
is
what?
Why is SLS so expensive to launch? That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Something we've been trying to figure out for years. I think we're talking over $2 billion per launch now.
Yeah, that's insane.
Hardware that is left over from the space shuttle program.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that technically more than a shuttle launch?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because I remember hearing when it was getting close to the $1 billion mark for a shuttle launch. So we're already double that. And it hasn't even gotten started, really. It's been driving me nuts. Driving us all nuts in the space fan community.
Yeah.
This is part of what bothers me about SLS is it's not that's not a justifiable cost, period. There's no way that it actually costs that. That's contracts plus margin plus profits plus blah 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 blah. It's a cost plus contract, I know, but there's no way that that's a sustainable business model or a sustainable model for a program. There's just no way. How why does it make why does it, other than just raking in dough, why does it make any sense to have that as your cost per launch for that system?
Come
Like
on, Detta.
I don't
You got to
I
think
don't
of the
get it.
shareholders here.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You need to cap the shareholders, and you need to think of the taxpayers who are giving you all that money.
In the case of I don't disagree, Detta. That's like perfect. But these companies are not beholden to that kind of an idea. They want to make money, and they want to make money for the people who own them. Therefore, how much money can I bring in
But that's a good
to
way to not
give?
make money because the contract gets canceled because it's too expensive.
Well, we'll make money for at least
I'm
like a decade,
I'm sorry,
right?
you're not going to get your profit because I can't afford plating your rocket in gold.
Yeah. Which they're not even doing.
Yeah, we can only use
plating it in foam.
I was going to say we can only use the foil, not solid gold. So
I mean, honestly, I've just been for the longest time now. I think that it's all those contractors just ripping off NASA. I mean, that's why we had to get rid of cost plus contracting. There's still a bit of that around, but with the commercial cargo and commercial crew program moving over to this fixed price contract model has been such an awesome improvement for things. With cost
yeah,
plus contracting, you can get away with being super greedy and saying, "Oh yeah, this is going to cost us billions of dollars and take us 10 years." Whereas, one of your other competitors could probably do it for a tenth of the price and in a quarter of the time.
Mhm.
So
I still like
I haven't
I
been able to
can't
justify it any other way.
I can't fathom that the actual cost of that vehicle, like paying your engineers and paying for parts and hardware and materials and all that, and as well as amortizing all the research and design that you've done over the program for the last 20 years. I can't imagine it costs half that.
Mm-hmm. Especially for hardware that NASA already owned. Like a lot of the engines, NASA already owned the engines, and then they had to repay for engines that they already owned at a much higher price than when they originally purchased them. And yes, there was refurbishment and work that had to be done on them to get them flight ready, but for crying out loud, full price? You need full price for an engine that you already own? That's like me buying a car for $45,000 10 years ago and taking it somewhere to get a repair or doing some sort of thing to make it compliant for your local emissions department or something like that, and I had to pay full price for the car again in today's dollars. So even though I purchased it for $45,000 10 years ago, I now have to pay $75,000 to get the repair done to satisfy emissions. Like, maybe that's a little bit too simple of a comparison, but that's what it feels like.
I don't even think it's that sensical. It's like buying a car 10 years ago for 45 grand, and then when you say now that you want to drive it, oh, you want it to operate. Oh, hold on. You need to pay another 45 grand so that our engineers can tear down your engine and reassemble it with starting lube because reasons.
Yeah.
I will just bust out my line that I always bust out when talking about the Space Launch System, which is that it is a rocket from another era. This was started well before, I think, this was started well before where we are, before Artemis. It was started before Asteroid Redirect. It was started before Constellation. It's a product of its time. And if we want to go to SLS in its current configuration, whatever we want to determine that to be, then we're talking about just before commercial cargo began. And the commercial cargo and commercial crew programs were not expected to succeed. That is very clear in the history that everyone speaks to who worked in those programs, which is that nobody expected those kinds of programs to succeed because of the types of contracts that they had. No way could you actually build a rocket and build a spacecraft that could carry cargo and people and do it with a fixed cost budget. Like, that's not how it works. At that time, you had to have that margin in order to build in, the money, or to get the profit out of it, however you want to say that with that. So it's a dinosaur, not
we
just with the
launched this-
technology, but also with the managerial mindset of it as well. It is a product of a bygone era, not just because it uses the shuttle technology, but because it looks at building and managing a program in such a way before, an archaic way, that for most people who have gotten interested in spaceflight recently, it doesn't make sense because they've never seen this archaic way of doing things, how the old ways of how it was done. That doesn't mean that, like, if it's a good idea to do things in the old ways, in the archaic days, we now know that maybe that wasn't the best way to do things. But just, I suppose, for those of us who have been around for a really long time covering this kind of stuff, it is a contract that I would have expected to have seen signed in 2011, right? So, because space,
but
there had been one Falcon 9 flight at that time.
So, we used this architecture for 35 years, and it didn't even accounting for inflation since April 12th, 1981. It didn't cost this much per launch.
No, not at all.
Anyway, moving on.
No disagreement. It's freaking expensive. It's too expensive. So
kind of, I do want to loop in because there have been a lot of really great comments in the chat room here about this, and some of these are funny to the point of depression. Like Massimo, SLS wasn't designed to be launched; it was designed as pork. Launching is basically an afterthought. Kind of feels that way. So many profit margins and management overhead. We got to pay for the endless studies to make sure that they have everything the way that they say that it's going to be.
It's middle management all the way down.
Mm-hmm. And like I agree with Raul Santos.
No skunk works here.
Cost plus does make sense when you're doing something completely new, but SLS is not. It's all old hardware. We've been studying this idea since at least 1991, which means people already had the idea before that. And I also agree with Joel Corley here. Boeing has said that the cancellation of SLS will result in the layoff of about 400 people. That means Boeing is bringing in about $5 million per person per launch. That is just a crazy amount of money. And that those 400 people aren't getting a bonus like that. That's all going straight to the top. Anyway, we're getting on an angry SLS rant, and to kind of wrap up this section,
let's get back to the angry politics rant.
Yeah, let's get back to the angry politics. Something that was
today's
really
a day
interesting.
Of strong emotions.
I think I want to say something. It wasn't Pentagon, but there was some government account on X that basically was putting out kind of a call to arms to SpaceX competitors of, we highly recommend that you get comparable systems online as soon as possible. I don't remember what the exact words, but I just remember seeing that and a discussion forming around of just like, oh, holy crap, I bet, everyone is super happy and also like freaked out at the same time, when it comes to like United Launch Alliance or Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, Firefly, even Stoke Space. Maybe this has kind of lit a fire under them to be like, maybe, we all want to see SpaceX succeed, but all these competitors, maybe they have a chance to actually get in there and seize some of these contracts if that scenario does play out, which I think at the end of the day, we all agree that it's probably not. This is just two, how do I say this nice? Two men who are arguing and putting all of our hobbies and the things that we enjoy at risk for it. But at the end of the day, it's probably just arguing, and I think that cooler heads will prevail. We all need to send, I saw the comment earlier, we all need to send Gwen Shotwell a fruit basket or some sort of gift basket for all her hard work. I'm sure she's going to swoop in and be like, no, we're not decommissioning Dragon. We've got contracts for the next 4 years. You're not screwing us out of that over some fight, Elon. She probably says it much more nicer and diplomatically, but, so even within Congress, I think cooler heads will prevail.
I'm gonna speak for myself, and you can subscribe if you like. I'm not necessarily a SpaceX fanboy. I don't have stake in which launch provider or which company survives. I just want the exploration to continue. And thus far, SpaceX has been doing a bang up job of investing and doing the engineering and doing the work and improving launch cadence and literally changing what the industry is and what the industry can do and changing what the goalposts are so that everybody else has to work hard. I think there should be multiple companies that are doing that, not just one. I think there are multiple companies that should be getting the government funding to do that, not just one. I don't have any personal investment in SpaceX's success, other than I hope Jamie has a long and prosperous career there, as well as all of the other engineers and friends that I have that work there. But like, we've got to figure out the exploration part, and that's what I'm after. I'm after the engineering and the exploration and the science that goes into this. If any other company can come up and compete with SpaceX, great. Let's do that. Let's figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, SpaceX is pretty good. They're pretty solid. Falcon 9 is one of the best rockets, if not maybe the best rocket that humanity has ever made in terms of its success and how it changed the industry and what it's done and what it's enabled. I mean, its low costs have helped out science, right? We've been able to add extra instruments or other things that we wouldn't have beforehand because, $100 million extra to launch services, as opposed to saving that $100 million and saying, okay, we'll put it into developing this massive laboratory piece of equipment down to something that weighs 4 kilograms that we could put into orbit around something. That's to me been like the big thing about that lowering of launch costs. So getting true competition to make SpaceX better than they already are would be astounding, and everyone would win from that. It's not just one of those things where it's like, oh great, that company wins because they're also competing with SpaceX as well. SpaceX gets that win too because then they've got to get better, and they're already pretty good. So like, what does an even better SpaceX look like? So looks pretty good to me. So
yeah. Ryan, do you have any final thoughts on this? Sorry for derailing you and
I've just
boring
been
you with all
sitting
the
back,
SLS talk.
relaxing, enjoying, observing, listening. It's been bliss. I am not surprised at what has happened. I think it was inevitable, to be completely honest. The personalities of President Trump and Elon Musk do not fit together perfectly like a puzzle piece. There was going to be some tension at some point, and it's just happened now at the start of June. It actually, to be perfectly honest, I thought it might have gotten a little bit more tense a little bit earlier, so I'm kind of surprised it lasted amicably this far, this long. In terms of the proposal Ted Cruz put out, again, I'm not entirely surprised because this is how federal budgets work, right? The White House says they want one thing, Congress says they want another thing, and then we go back and forwards until October, right? So this is part and parcel of how these things, whether you think they should work like this or not, that's a completely different discussion. But for decades, this is how it has worked. It's just a little bit more emotional this time. I am kind of surprised to see a proposal for SLS to be funded through to Artemis 5, because I think Artemis 3 might have been enough, because the SLS, like, it is a fact, SLS is ridiculously over budget and ridiculously behind schedule, and the SLS architecture back in 1990 made perfect sense. And I don't think anyone can be blamed for that. I think, considering where we were at that point with the space shuttle program and with commercial space not really being a thing, SLS made perfect sense. But we're not in the 1990s anymore. We're in 2025. Falcon 9 just celebrated its 15th anniversary. We've been landing rockets for a decade. we are at the beginning of the commercial space industry picking up steam. That ball is rolling down the hill faster than it ever has been before. Why do we are getting to the point where SLS doesn't make sense anymore? Because we are on the precipice of commercial industry being able to do and far exceed the capabilities of SLS and Orion. So Artemis 3, in my opinion, is kind of that boundary right now of where SLS is no longer needed. I am surprised to see Artemis 4 and Artemis 5, wanting to be funded at this position from Ted Cruz's proposal. Gateway as well. It all depends on your opinion. In my opinion, I think we should be investing in a base on the lunar surface, not a base around the moon. We want to live on the moon. We don't want to live around the moon. We have commercial LEO destinations that are going to be coming online over the next few years, over the next decade, which will be able to replace the services provided currently by the International Space Station. But again, these are all proposals. White House says one thing, Congress says another thing, and then we go back and forwards until October or even later in some instances. So yeah, but I can't change anything. Those are just my thoughts. We'll just have to wait and see how all of this, everything at the moment is being thrown into a blender. It's being run, and we'll see what comes out on the other end in a few months' time.
That's right.
It's like those old YouTube videos. Will it blend? That is the question.
Well, I'd certainly like to know everybody else's thoughts about this. What do you think about, the scenario of, Dragon being decommissioned early? What do you think about continuing SLS at least into Artemis 4 and Artemis 5? And does it make sense to even have the Gateway space station if SLS only goes up to Artemis 5? Because the whole purpose in its weird near rectilinear halo orbit is to make up for the lack of delta V that the Orion capsule and its service module has. And it's the whole reason why it's placed there. Personally, I don't have a problem with having a small lunar space station, but a little bit more of a convenient orbit that would be able to rescue astronauts at a moment's notice or something like that. But I really want to know what all of you watching think about all of this and what should be the direction that we should go from here. So leave a comment, let us know what you think about that, and we can address that at a future time.
Ryan's just being smug because his country's space program isn't being run by pedantic children.
Our country, okay. That is true.
What?
That is true.
News to me.
But again, I'm not gonna sit here and be like European sweep incoming, where our launch program is significantly behind North Korea. I'm not gonna sit here smug on a high hill and be like, look at us, we're so mature and we haven't launched anything for 50 years. Like
I gotta say, the European Space
Slow and
Agency,
steady wins the race.
ESA right now has a chance to do the funniest thing ever. So, here's your shot, Europe. Come on, baby.
Seize the day.
Come on, baby.
Yeah. Also, just quickly before the chat room gets the wrong idea, I would just like to clarify my position on Gateway. I agree with Mike. I would support a station in lunar orbit, but it's just the current parameters of Gateway that just don't make Gateway was developed for a specific reason upon specific reason upon specific reason that don't exist anymore. Gateway was developed to serve as an interface between the HLS and between Orion. Artemis 3 is going to be a direct docking between Orion and HLS. That removes a reason for Gateway existing. It was designed to be in this near rectilinear halo orbit, so it would have communication line of sight with the South Pole for the majority of its orbit. It would always face Earth, and it would be able, and the SLS would have enough delta V to actually get to the orbit. When we're going to develop solutions such as what Blue Origin is coming up with that cislunar transporter, that won't matter anymore. That's another one of these reasons that Gateway doesn't the current what's the word? I can just the Gateway in its current the current plan. The reason Gateway is in the position it's intended to be in, all of these reasons are being knocked off the list why Gateway should exist, right? So I'm in favor of a lunar space station, but I'm not in favor of the current architecture that Gateway is built around, because it keeps being dismantled. Like a block is taken here, and a block is taken here, and a block is taken here, and suddenly we have this small space station in this really awkward orbit that exists for a reason that no longer exists.
Well, let's move right along and talk about this a little bit. I did just want to show a little bit of a highlight clip And I know that Jamie doesn't like us to do it this way, but we're going to kind of need to anyway. So let me just roll this for a minute and talk about what they think happened for the lunar landing. So we were doing a live stream and talking about, we were watching it live and seeing all the things that were going on. And there wasn't a whole lot of telemetry
It's
when
less than
it
a
finally
full
came on.
kilometer. All
And
the thrusters
the
are
telemetry that we were
working.
getting seemed pretty spotty. It would go in and out. And it wasn't until the last minute that we were able to get a lot closer towards the actual numbers that we were supposed to be seeing. And it was way higher. Let me back up just a little bit. It was way higher than it was supposed to be. The right before we had mission cutout. Let me jump a little bit further here. Sorry about this. There we go. Right before we had cutouts, I mean, we're looking at 219 kilometers per second at only 329 meters from the surface, still going over 187 kilometers per hour when it impacted the moon. And yeah, we get that kind of negative altitude there for a split second. And they're still not 100% sure what completely went wrong with this. The big thing that they were talking about was the laser interferometer, which might be related to a similar problem that they were having last time, where their computer basically misjudged its altitude and wasn't able to have the proper maneuver that it needed. But last time it hovered at it basically canceled out its momentum, thinking that it was almost at the surface. So it hovered there for a minute until all of its fuel was expired, and it still had like 3 kilometers to go before its drop, and obviously broke apart in a couple of pieces when it finally hit the surface. This time around, it seems like it was a opposite problem, where they thought that they were maybe much higher than they actually were, and so it wasn't starting its programmed maneuvers to slow down, to do its braking burn and slow down and get into that nice orientation to have a nice soft landing on the moon. So that's just a theory at this point. We've only been getting a handful of updates from them. Hopefully we'll be able to get more, but certainly the sentiment that I'm seeing is that they're getting a lot of support from the space industry, a lot of support from the space fan community, and are going to continue forward and keep pressing forward. They have lots of different operations in motion right now. They've got a Luxembourg office that is building more rovers and more small satellites to help establish lunar communications for future missions. They've got their US base office, which is where they're going to be moving over all of the construction of their next lunar landers. And because of that US office, they've also been able to get CLPS contracts, commercial lunar payload services contracts. So despite another failure of their Hokuto mission, they're not stopping, and they're going to keep going as far as they possibly can. And of course are eagerly awaiting the results of whatever the budget's results come about for the moon exploration program. But in the meantime, they're going to keep on doing and keep doing their plan of having as many investors and sponsorships as possible to make sure that their next missions happen. So, bit of sad news, but
Josh Simpson brings up,
sorry,
and
what
I
was
don't
that?
know. Josh Simpson brings up, and I don't know what the architecture is, but it's with it being so cold. Do they use lidar, and would that change the sensitivity?
Oh my gosh, good point, Josh Simpson. I hadn't even thought about that. Maybe that could be a reason why that was on the fritz for them. Huh. I'm going to have to look into that a little bit, because I know that they were using they had a laser interferometer, and they also had an altimeter, and we're talking about radar. So I wouldn't be surprised if they are using lidar on this, since they kind of have the systems to make that happen. Man, I hadn't even considered the temperature causing that to be on the fritz for them. I really wonder if that's it. And
Within 30 feet
feet.
of the lunar surface has entirely different condition than higher altitudes, so maybe dealing with a dynamic landing condition. Or
30
could you
feet
just
though seems incredibly low considering what we with the data that we saw on the live stream. Like we were still, you know, several hundred meters above the lunar surface, traveling way too quickly. So, you know, if that's something that's within 30, like I'm not discrediting the theory whatsoever, because I'm not knowledgeable in LiDAR to that degree, but you know, if this is only something that could change within the last 30 feet, I doubt that could have an impact considering we saw this lander going way too quickly, several hundred meters above the surface. But that is according to the telemetry, which, you know, went into negative numbers, which I'm not 100% sure how you manage that. But either way.
Means you went underground. They crashed so hard they went inside. No, I'm just
telling you,
kidding.
JPL was onto something with their little triangle pyramid balloon thingy for mirror rovers.
We should start doing those balloon bounces for lunar landings.
I
Is
mean,
that what you're saying?
if landing is what your difficulty is, like that problem's already been solved.
Hopefully the third time around is somewhere in the middle though, because you know their first mission it landed too high up. They were hovering 5 kilometers above the surface. This one they clearly weren't slowing down in time, so they crashed into the moon at a high speed. Maybe this time around it'll be somewhere in the middle, and they'll actually get a soft touchdown because you know the iSpace they're good at getting nearly there. Like 2 times in a row they've nearly got there. You know, this isn't like the recent Russian lunar probe, which you know went kaput, you know, in high Earth orbit and couldn't actually conduct any sort of maneuvers around the moon and just smashed into the moon. They've nearly gotten there twice in a row. So you know, fingers crossed they get it stuck on the third time because they have gotten you literally cannot get any closer to landing than they have already gotten. They've gotten so close just without the soft landing part. Like so close.
So
The
close.
next one will be just right.
That's the hope. That's the hope. 100%. So yeah,
I hope
I'm
they
still
carry
rooting
on.
for them. Yeah, me too. I hope that they carry on. I'm really excited that they have some really great people that are working with them. Their original Google Lunar X Prize team and the people that they've assembled for the American office, I think are awesome. A big fan of Ron Guerin, former astronaut. So I'm really looking forward to what they do and hope that things continue. And that everyone who has these types of ambitions are able to continue and succeed with their programs. Hopefully, Intuitive's machines will get more stable ones in the future. But anyway, not to get sidetracked. I think we should go ahead and move right along. Well, to kind of close things up, we've been yapping for quite a while. But did you guys see the latest test from one of the Chinese companies? Space Epoch is their name. I don't know if any of you had a chance to see this, but
I was very impressed by I'm not sure whether this was intended recoverability, but we can discuss.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Here, let me blow this up so that we can actually see this and see what I'm talking about.
Well, don't blow up the rocket.
Yeah, don't blow up the rocket. So, super interesting test. This is a smaller rocket. It's all stainless steel and kind of looks like Starship, but it's actually much closer to like the size of Falcon 9 or possibly the upper stage of a Falcon 9 because as you can see from the video, it only has one engine. So pretty interesting test, but they were able to do this hop and hover test. And as you'll see in just a moment, they relight their engine and do a successful splashdown of this rocket. And the crazy to me, as Ryan alluded to, is that they were able to just go out there with fishing boats and recover this thing. No explosion, even though it kind of looks like there's some explosions right there. This test actually survived. And it's just mind-blowing to me that they were able to recover this thing. Sorry, I should have been a little bit better prepared, but they had, let me get the pulled up of the that recovered this thing, because it's mind-blowing to me that this thing was able to survive. And it looks like they also ripped off a handful of things from, here we go. They ripped off a handful of things from from more like Blue Origin systems. You can kind of see the flaps that they have here. and it looks like it's multiple bars of steel, but the way that it comes out is really similar to the New Shepard system, which I find to be really interesting. And yeah, they were just able to tow this thing into port, and um, uh, was completely fine and didn't have any problems with it, and they should be able to reuse it pretty quickly. So I find that really crazy and really admirable. Here's some pictures of that recovery. That they were able to do this, and looking forward to what they can do with the next up. I'm assuming that this was probably an upper stage, and that their full stage for it, because they plan to catch this thing with chopsticks. Assuming that the first stage booster will be tested at another time, but a lot of interesting things that they are kind of ripping off and following the way from the American companies that are doing this, and they're not far behind. It seems like to me that they are going to have, they are going to have their own reusable rockets very, very soon. So, we just keep getting surprised with all these different tests from these random assortment of Chinese companies.
Just imagine what kind of rocket you could make if you had everybody else's designs.
Well, you'd make a rocket that works for you.
Yeah.
So,
I bought a Starship booster on Wish, and this is what came.
I feel like we've been talking about, Chinese vehicles getting to the point of being reusable for so long now, and it's going to be really exciting to finally see an organization that isn't SpaceX be able to pull this off. Because don't get me wrong, I love SpaceX. SpaceX does incredible things, and they've been, propping up the launch industry for, well over a decade at this point, essentially. But, other people have to catch up, and if no companies in the US are going to be close to it, personally, I think depending on how well the next flight of New Glenn goes, it's going to be between Blue Origin and one of these Chinese companies for the next organization, which is going to be able to have a vehicle which is propulsively recoverable, right? Because, ULA is nowhere to be seen in the space. All of the other companies, Firefly, Relativity, Stoke, they're still in the development phases of their vehicles, and they're currently building the initial hardware for those things. But, China's already, multiple Chinese organizations have flown these hopper tests now. We have Space Epoch, we have Space Pioneer, we have Land Space. There's so many more. I've forgotten them. They've gone off the top of my head. Surely it's only a matter of time now until SpaceX has some Chinese competition, right? Surely it's only a matter of time, and it's going to be really exciting to finally see something we've been talking about for years at this point come to fruition.
Yeah.
Well, this is the all ships part of the rise with the tide. Like, you prove that you've proved that it can be done, and if there's a market behind it that can support it, whether it's backed by government or not, like they're going to find the configuration that works best to do the thing, and it's going to be copy pasta. Like, I know that there were spies in the government, the Russian government or USSR when they designed Buran, but they came to similar conclusions about a lot of things that they didn't have spy data for. And the similar thing, like who is it? Josh Simpson says it's more of a law of physics that dictates that most of the common design and similar approaches, more than different style or ego of country pride. Like, it turns out that math knows how to solve that problem, and if you are giving it the same inputs, you're going to get a very similar result. But this is awesome to have another entity be able to do the same thing. They're developing their own software. They're not getting software from SpaceX. Like, they're figuring out their own solutions to the same problem. It just happens to look very similar.
Yeah. It turns out that the laws of physics apply equally in the United States of America as they do in the People's Republic of China.
But
Physics
everything's
is
still
undefeated.
upside down in Australia. No, just kidding. Well, anyway, I want to be.
Australia gets it easy because the rockets just fall off,
Oh, all they got to do is just release the launch claps and just let it fall.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what.
yeah. Really efficient propulsion.
returning them to the base is harder.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's got it now. Now it makes sense. Well, big thank you to Dave Avery for your gift of 5 Tomorrow memberships to folks in the chat room. So thank you very much to that. And also a big thank you to everyone else who has been supporting this show and making this happen. We would not be able to do this without you. So big support, big thank you to our ground support members. You can join the ground support level for as little as $1 a month if you haven't been gifted one already. And it's because of you guys that we are able to continue doing this show and have the type of content that we're trying to produce. We're going to have a lot more space pods for you guys soon. We're going to have a bit more members only content for you guys, talking about plans and things that we should be doing on the rest of the show. But in the meantime, again, thank you so much to everyone who is helping to contribute. And right after this, we're going to be discussing a little bit more and sharing some more of our thoughts and opinions about the news for this week in our After Dark, which will be coming on live not long after this. So for those of you who are a member, or for those that were just gifted a membership, you should receive that notification very shortly. And with that, again, thank you very much, everyone. And we will see you guys again next time. Take care.